Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Courtside. I am your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports. In today's episode, I will press the panic button on some of the NFL's best teams and analyze the Trevor Ariza trade between the Suns and the Wizards. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. So the past few weeks in the NFL have been pretty crazy. You have some teams winning games they shouldn't be winning, teams losing games they shouldn't be losing, and there are 6 teams right now, I think, that I'm looking at and wondering if I'm pressing the panic button on them. Now this is kind of more of an exercise for this year, but also a little bit for the future. And I'm going to start with the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings, they get the win against the Dolphins this week, week 15. At home, and 1 o'clock hour, Kirk Cousins lights it up. Nothing new really there. But I look back to their loss to the Patriots. They fired their offensive coordinator. In Miami, I don't put a lot of stock into that win. I just don't think Miami's that great of a football team, especially on the defensive side. They are one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the league, especially against the ground game, which Dalvin Cook had a field day. So, long story short, I am pressing the panic button on the Vikings. Their defense is not nearly as good as it was last year. Their offense, they upgraded at quarterback, and they don't look as good for some reason. And I don't think Mike Zimmer's on the hot seat, but if they do miss the playoffs, I do start to wonder how secure that job is. Now, I personally believe he's a great coach, and I think last year was a perfect example of that, of him just being a really good coach, really good defensive coach specifically. Their defense hasn't been terrible this year, but it for the first few months, it was really bad. It's been better recently, but still, it's not as elite as it was last year. So I am pressing the panic button on the Vikings. They're just not as good as they were last year, and they upgraded the most important position at quarterback. So take that as you will, but that doesn't usually that should not bode well for any team. All right, next up here, I got the Seahawks. I'm not pressing the panic button on them. I know they lost to the 49ers in San Francisco yesterday, but this is what the team is. They're a running-centric team with very few playmakers on the outside. And listen, Doug Baldwin, he's good. He's past his prime. Tyler Lockett is good for a few big plays, but other than that, you can't rely on him for a ton of catches every game. I just think offensively it goes through the ground game. It was okay yesterday. It wasn't bad, but they're going to lose some games on the road. That's just what they are. I like Russell Wilson a lot. The defense has been middle of the pack in the league, which is surprising considering how much of a lack of talent they have on that side of the ball. But overall, I'm not pressing the panic button on them because I just think this is what they are. They're a mediocre team. They're going to lose some games they shouldn't lose, just like yesterday in St. Clair. All right, next up now, this one isn't necessarily for this year. This is more of a long-term thing, but the Green Bay Packers, I'm pressing the panic button on them. They have Aaron Rodgers getting paid a ton of money. They have Devonta Adams, and that's basically it now. Obviously, that's not it, right? You have Aaron Jones, Jair Alexander. There's other players on the team, obviously, that can play. But I don't know. I mean, I'm watching them in some of their games this year, and I'm watching Aaron Rodgers specifically, and it doesn't look the same. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look as good as he's been in the past, in that talent that got him this big 4-year, $130 million contract extension. Just generally, the thing that's been so impressive about the Packers for the past, decade or so has been that they have such a lack of talent outside of Rodgers, and they still get it done. But I think you also look to past years, though, and, right, they had Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams was the third guy. And now he's the first guy. And he's a number 1 receiver. Devontae Adams is a great player. Outside of him at the receiver position, it's Equanimeous St. Brown, Marquez Valdez I can't even pronounce the Scalding. Randall Cobb is still there, but he's a shell of his former self. Jimmy Graham, they just did not know how to use Jimmy Graham. He should have been much better. Defensively, Clay Matthews is about 10 years past his prime, it looks like. They have injuries all over the place. And the fact that Rodgers is taking up so much cap room means that they're going to have to let some of their key free agents walk away. I'm pressing the panic button on the Packers. So, also, we had the Cowboys getting shut out by the Indianapolis Colts. And am I pressing the panic button? Like, yes and no. Because on the one hand, you got shut out in Week 15. But on the other hand, it's like, this is what... I didn't really learn anything new from this game. I mean, they have a good young defense. And offensively, they need Ezekiel Elliott, their star running back, to get over 100 yards. Like, every single game for them to even have minimal success. And I've never been that high on Dak Prescott. I mean, I remember his rookie year, people were saying, this guy is the next great Dallas franchise quarterback. I don't know if he is. You know, to be fair, they don't have much talent on the perimeter. Cooper's really good, but outside of him, there's really nothing. So that's part of it, but also it's at a certain point you have to make plays if you're a quarterback. And you have to stop making excuses over and over again. It was dink and dunk yesterday, and the offense just won't be good enough to win the game on the road in the playoffs. Now, luckily, they have a home game if they win the division. They'll probably... I don't know if they'll win or lose that game. I'd say they probably win that game if it's at home. But if they go on the road, I don't see how you can possibly trust them if they go on the road. I really don't. Rams, I'm pressing the panic button. 3 straight weeks now, they have just looked bad. They went to Detroit. They had a bad game. Okay, fine. It's one game. We can allow it to happen. You go to Chicago, you get... I mean, offensively, they just struggled the entire game. Okay, fine. Chicago's a good team. It's going to be hard for any team to go and beat Chicago, even the best teams in the league, like the Saints or the Chiefs. Their best offenses, I should say. Rams are really good offense, but to lose at home to the Eagles with Nick Foles, and not just to lose, but to get pretty much get it handed to them in every aspect of the game, that makes me question their chances at winning a Super Bowl. They have a lack of depth, which is, I mean, listen, on the outside, Cooper Kupp goes down. Robert Woods he's solid. I like Cooks. I just don't think he can be looked at as a number one receiver talent-wise. They have Josh Reynolds, their fourth receiver. Everybody's hyping up now. He's the fourth receiver for a reason. Running back-wise, they have one good running back in Todd Gurley, and everybody else is The O-line is good, I guess. And this is where I question Jared Goff. I think at this age, at this point in his career, he is more of a system quarterback than anything. And there are some throws he just can't make. There's some plays he just can't make. And at a certain point, offensively, we knew it was going to... I expected it to slow down at some point. But against the Eagles with a banged-up secondary, they have one guy in their secondary that was a starter at the beginning of the year, Malcolm Jenkins, and they just could not move the ball the entire game. They couldn't get anybody going deep. It was bad offensively, but defensively, they just aren't that great. They have Aaron Donald, who's really good. They have Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib at corner, yet they can't shut any receivers down. Alshon Jeffrey put up, $150 on them? Jeez. I mean, the defense has been letting them down, but I look at the offense more specifically, and I say, if they have to go into Chicago in the playoffs, or into New Orleans against some pretty good defense, or even the Cowboys, I don't know how the seeding would work with that, but if they put the Cowboys, how does that look? Because offensively, the Cowboys' defense is good. They shut down the Saints. If the Rams and Cowboys met up in the playoffs, I don't think the Rams put up over 30 points. I think maybe they get to 20. So, I'm pressing the panic button on the Rams. And finally, the Patriots. Oh yeah, I'm pressing the panic button. First 5 lost year since 2009, 2010. So it's one thing to lose in Miami on a miracle play, breakdown by the defense, coaching mistake by having Gronk in there as safety, expecting Tannehill to throw a 75-yard Hail Mary for some reason. That's one thing. Offensively, they were great that game, though, so that was fine. But they never lose to Pittsburgh. They haven't lost to Pittsburgh in, however many years. And they lose yesterday. And defensively, they were okay, but they couldn't stop the run, and that's one of the reasons I think they lost that game at the end, was because they couldn't stop Jalen Samuels, the third running back, the third running back in the depth chart at the beginning of the year. So that's really concerning for the defense. I mean, they're just giving up a ton of yards on the ground. Fine, they stopped Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster from having a great day. I don't care about that. The offense, though, that's the problem. They've had 5 losses this year, all on the road. 4 of the 5 I pin more on the offense than the defense. And the thing that was striking to me yesterday was the 14 penalties, which was the most in a few years. And a bunch of pre-snap penalties, false starts. I think everybody on the offensive line had a penalty except for the center, David Andrews. I was counting at the end of the game. Like, the tackles, Cannon and Brown each had 2 or 3 penalties each, holding and false starts combined. And then Tooney had a big false start or holding at the end, and Shaq Mason had a big holding at the end. It was just bad. The offense is not that good. The offense really is not that good. I mean, come playoff time, when they use James White more, I think they're trying to save James White for the playoffs. I think that's why he hasn't been getting used as much recently. But if they don't have a home game in the playoffs, if they don't have a bye in the playoffs, I don't see this team getting to the Super Bowl if they don't have a bye in the playoffs. And losing to Pittsburgh yesterday, having all those penalties, it feels different from past years, even just last year. And the defense was not that great last year, but I felt more confident in one play could they get a stop. I felt more confident last year than they did this year. I mean, they're banged up all over the place defensively. I mean, they had John Simon, who they picked up off the street a couple weeks ago, and on a crucial 3rd down in the 4th quarter, and he makes a mistake. The Steelers pick up a 3rd and 8, not clinching the game completely because obviously Brady got the ball back, but just bad defensive play, a very inconsistent offense. The offense is either going for 30 plus, or it's going for 10 or less. It's brutal. So I'm pressing the panic button on the Patriots. So recently, I think NBA fans, including myself, experienced one of the weirder trade situations in recent memory. So originally there was a 3-team deal agreed to between the Phoenix Suns, Washington Wizards, and the Memphis Grizzlies. So supposedly, the Wizards were going to add Trevor Ariza, as well as a couple of second-round picks from Memphis. The Grizzlies would get Kelly Oubre, and the Suns would get Austin Rivers, Wayne Selden, Memphis guard Wayne Selden, and Memphis guard Dylan Brooks. However, the trade fell through because apparently the Phoenix Suns were actually acquiring Marshawn Brooks instead of Dylan, and the Suns did not want Marshawn Brooks, so they backed out of the deal. The Grizzlies were kicked out of the trade, and now a new trade has been agreed to between just the Suns and Wizards, and so the Wizards are they're getting Trevor Ariza, and the Suns are getting Kelly Oubre and Austin Rivers. And besides the fact that this is just a weird situation overall, what are the Wizards doing? I mean, so I think a couple episodes ago, I talked about the Wizards and what they should do to improve their team, and this is pretty close to the exact opposite. So listen to these. So Trevor Ariza's numbers this year: he's averaging 34 minutes a game. He's starting usually. He's putting up 10 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's shooting about 38% from the field, and his contract just this year, $15 million. So they're getting him off the books. It's an expiring contract. That part of the deal I like. I like the expiring contract. I hate what they're giving up, though. Now, I don't care about Austin Rivers. He's been bad this year. He's getting paid $12.6 million. Get rid of him. Now, he's also an expiring contract, though. So just straight up, okay, that's perfect, right? You're getting more talent. Still an expiring contract. The problem I have with this trade is Kelly Oubre, who is actually playing fairly well. Now, I don't think he's been overall as good as he was last year. But, so he has 26 minutes a game, so 8 minutes per game less than Trevor Ariza. He's putting up 13 points, 3 more than Ariza. 4.5 boards, only 1 less than Ariza. Now, assists, he doesn't really get many. He only has 1 assist a game usually. 43% from the field overall. So, I'm not saying he's been, astronomically better than Trevor Ariza, but the production he's giving the Wizards is pretty close. I don't think there's much difference there. And Oubre, they're both good defensively. There's really no difference between the two guys defensively for the most part. I think Ariza may be an inch or two taller, but the contract for Oubre, you also have to keep in mind, he has 2 years left, so he has a year after this season. $3.2 million this year, $4.5 next year. And then he's a restricted free agent, where maybe he gets paid, maybe he doesn't, I don't know. But I don't see the logic here from the Wizards. I understand it a little bit more in the first one. So you're giving up the same players, but you're also getting 2 second-round picks, which I don't love, but fine, you're getting some extra value. But when it's just straight up like this, it's clear that the Suns win this trade because they're getting younger. They keep an expiring contract who's getting paid less money than the original expiring contract they have. And now I would say, they're rebuilding anyways. Who cares if they lose another game or two because they trade away Trevor Ariza? You're looking at a guy in Oubre who supposedly, apparently has not reached his prime yet. And you're looking at Ariza, who is past his prime. It just doesn't add up. And when I heard the Wizards were looking to trade John Wall, Bradley Beal, Oddport, I'm like, great. Awesome. That's what they need to do. And they completely gone away from that. Now, maybe it's partially having to do with the success they've had. They're 12-18, so they're better than they were at the beginning. I think they started off 2-8, 2-9. So they're better than they were at the beginning of the year, but the team isn't that good. There's 5 teams in the Eastern Conference. You could argue for a 6th in the Pistons. Those are the only teams competing to get to the finals from the East. The Wizards should be competing, but they're just not competing. So, now the original deal from the Wizards' perspective, getting 2 extra second-round picks in there, that's better than what they got here. I don't understand from the Wizards' perspective why this trade is better for them than the first one. I don't think, maybe they don't even think it is. They probably don't think it is because they're not getting anything extra. They're not giving up anything less. So, end of the day, this is just a terrible trade by the Wizards. Not at all what they should be trying to do. They're getting older, not necessarily getting any talent. They may not even make the playoffs at this point. They should continue to try to trade John Wall if they have even been shopping him at all. Bradley Beal is the one guy I'd be okay with them keeping because I think he's good. But once again, as I said this plenty of times, you can find guys to put up between 15 and 20 points, shoot well from downtown for cheaper than Bradley Beal. So, bad trade by the Wizards. They need to look to trade Wall, Beal, or Porter before this year's trade deadline. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. Join me tomorrow, where I will discuss more of the biggest storylines in sports and do some sports theory. And as usual, remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening, and don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter. The link will be in the description. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.